Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new interview from MinnMax. MinnMax is a place about games, friends, and getting better. Thank you for clicking on this. Thank you for being here. My name is Ben Hansen. This is a big oral history of The Simpsons Hit and Run, which released September 16th, 2003 on the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. If you clicked on this, you probably played it and are a fan of it. This is a group developer discussion where everybody's talking about their experience developing the game, how it all came together, scrapped plans for a sequel, scrapped plans for a PSP port. Obviously, it goes without saying, this is just a sliver of the development team. So shout out to everybody else who worked on this game, Vlad, the producer over there at Radical, everybody else who worked on this thing. But this is hopefully your best look at how the game came together and the team that managed to put it together over at Radical. If you enjoyed this interview or the timestamps below, we'd appreciate it if you just did one small thing, which is a big thing for us, which is subscribing to MinnMax's YouTube channel. We have a ton more developer interviews on this channel in addition to a bunch of other content. And if you want to support this type of content directly, you can go to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. We are a crowd-funded operation here at MinnMax, so please help support independent games media. And if you support us at that $5 tier on Patreon, you unlock the podcast version of this interview, all of our other interviews, early access and ad-free access to the MinnMax Show podcast, The Deepest Dive, which is our huge game club discussion. There's a ton more in there. And special shout out to Jawar Hello from the MinnMax community. We have a tier over on Patreon for game champions. You can choose any game under the sun. We'll declare you its champion on the MinnMax Show podcast and in the description for every MinnMax video and podcast. Then we have what we call the Game Championship, where we pit all those games against each other that people chose over the last couple of months and then make bonus content for whatever won. The Simpsons Hit and Run won that last poll, so shout out to Jawar Hello, a supporter from the community who directly supports content like this. Literally, this wouldn't exist without him and without everybody supporting us on Patreon. But without further ado, here's a sliver of the development team for The Simpsons Hit and Run. Hello, everybody, and welcome to MinnMax. My
Hello.
God.
Hello.
Yay!
Hey,
this is a whole damn crew. Thank you so much for making this possible. It was, believe it or not, a challenge to line up, but thank you all for sticking with us because there was a lot of back and forth for scheduling. You're all heroes. All right. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. Steve, welcome.
Howdy.
You know what's a better way to go about this is probably roles. Carrie, what was your role on Simpsons Hit and Run?
Oh, I was one of the lead programmers on Simpsons Hit and Run.
There we go. Steve, what was your role?
Associate producer.
Love it. Darren.
Well, part-time dancer, but also it was my first gig as a designer.
Oh, awesome. Part-time dancer. I want to get back to it. Greg?
I was a programmer.
Right on. John?
Gameplay programmer, I guess.
Okay.
I was the executive producer at Fox and dealt with Gracie and Fox politics.
Okay. All right. I want to unpack all that stuff. Chris, welcome. What was your role?
I was one of the designers and I wrote most of it.
Oh, really? I thought they brought in a Simpsons writer to tackle that whole thing.
It's more complicated than that. Basically, we all write a bunch of stuff and that goes off to Simpsons land and they sort of like filter and edit and then it sort of comes back to us. But a lot of times we'd send it out there and they'd be like, yeah, it reads good. You know.
Hey, I mean, that's a compliment, right?
Yeah.
That's
I didn't mind it.
Okay, when I was lining this up, at a certain point, somebody said like, oh, wait a minute, this is just like a Hothead reunion. So a majority of you went on to work at Hothead together then after this?
Yeah, everyone but John.
Fucking Vlad. Could have reached out.
Okay, John, yeah, your role, I mean, were you in the office with these folks or you were a completely separate entity dealing with more contractual legal nightmares?
No, I worked for worked at Fox, but I was the producer at Fox, so I handled the creative on the Fox side, worked with Radical on a daily basis to make sure game was tracking because we were funding and everything was going well. And then I liaisoned with Matt Groening and Gracie Films to get everything approved and then the vision set and all the approvals. And I was led most of the voiceovers.
Okay. Ooh, all right. There's a lot to unpack here. In general, and everybody can chime in, please jump on top of one another, please. How often is this game coming up in your lives? Is it something that people reach out to you about more than most other games, or where are you all at in your relationship to Simpsons Hit and Run?
I have students at work ask me all the time about it, like all the time.
Really? So,
I've been asked to remaster this or how it could be remastered no less than 100 times in the last 5 years.
And the answer is?
It's up to Disney.
Disney. Okay, Disney, and I guess would now...
Because they bought Fox.
Right. And now Microsoft buying Activision, would that matter at all for?
Yeah, because
different product-
Activision owns the code, Disney owns the assets. That's the way the contracts work.
Okay.
So the underlying code that Radical created, they would own, but the assets, the art, the voiceover, and the characters would be owned by Disney.
Okay. All right. So slim chance. Does everybody want to see it? Is everyone pushing for it? There's like the fan remake, obviously, which is cool, but you can't really legally release that and have it expected to be staying online.
In lieu of a sequel.
Anything we did anyways. They should just re-release that. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was.
Wait, what was this?
The Unreal, there's a dude who did
Oh, that
Unreal.
guy's amazing. Yeah.
It's better than the work we did. I'm pretty sure they stole the art, but it's awesome. You should just release that.
Stole a lot of things, but yeah.
Yeah. And John, you're pushing for a sequel instead?
Oh, no, in lieu of a sequel, because we had a sequel lined up. We had a design doc, we had an approved story, we had approved direction. I think a remaster for a generation that missed it would be great.
Yeah, for sure.
At my previous job, a guy there told me that he tried to impress a girl by telling her that he works with a guy that worked on Hit and Run. I don't think she was actually impressed, but he really enjoyed recounting that to me. That was recently. That was like 6 months ago or something.
Wow.
What is it? What is it about the game? You think it's just a combination of quality game and with the license, the sales numbers were through the roof, and now it's just a whole wave of nostalgia that's kind of catching up and reaching out to you folks?
Yeah, I think it's got a bit of a cult following. Like it was a good game that came out and hit the right points at the right time. And for me, it just keeps coming up with, I work with a bunch of people who were kids playing it, and now they're in game design, and they will often say that this game inspired them or helped inspire them to, getting into the industry, which makes me feel great, but also makes me feel old because, this was 20 years ago and, time waits for no one.
Yeah. We were so lucky too with the fact there were all those parents out there who said, I won't buy you GTA 3, but this game kind of looks like GTA 3, so I'll buy you this one instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've interviewed a number of young programmers trying to get into the industry, and they're like, and I grew up on that game. I'm like, that's really cool. It's crazy. You're so young.
So where does this project start? It would technically be Simpsons Road Rage, right? That was kind of the predecessor. Is that, John, are you a good starting point for talking about the collaboration here?
I can start the genesis of it, right? Obviously, Ian Wilkinson, after Road Rage hit, it was, I'll say an homage to Crazy Taxi, but that really was not meant to be a direct shot at Crazy Taxi because Matt Groening said, Radical said we have a driving engine. Matt Groening said I need two characters talking in a car to get the humor across. You can't just have one person driving. So it was a natural fit, and it was an homage to Crazy Taxi, I'll say that. And then where do we go from there is just like, Radical wanted to get out of the car. Matt Groening wanted to get out of the car. It was Gracie was nervous about getting out of the car. And I think Fox executives did not want to get out of the car at first because they just wanted a quick sequel, a quick return. Because usually they were trying to benefit from the money they spent on the code. The sequel is usually less cost because you just rinse and repeat. But it was a good 3 or 4 month debate to get everybody to agree to get out of the car on the Fox and Gracie side. But that's kind of where it started. But that's something that I would say Radical was pushing from the start.
Yeah. Okay. What about going back even further? That idea of who's reaching out to who? How does Radical team up with all right, naturally that they're going to make the Simpsons game?
Oh, well, obviously it's an easy connection because they were making our sports games. And then those games were killed. I think Fox was getting out of the sports business. But we had a strong relationship with Radical. We really liked their team. I think we were working with Cam Weber and Vlad at that time. We found what could we work. We went through a bunch of IPs, and it just felt like they wanted to make a prototype for a Simpsons driving game. And they did that, and they impressed a lot of people. And then the kind of Road Rage just kind of took off from there. Yeah.
When you say working with Gracie, is that James L. Brooks in an office? Like, what does Gracie look like as an entity to work with here?
It's intimidating because it's James L. Brooks in an office, but Denise Urquhart runs Gracie for him. She does the day-to-day on The Simpsons. But it's a very intimidating office. There's quite a few awards on many various films, television shows, and plays around it. But yeah, they're the driving force that kind of runs the day-to-day. Matt Groening and Millie Smythe, who's his right-hand person, was really the creative driving force that was working with them to get what Radical needed to fuel the pumps to make the game correctly in their eyes.
How involved was Matt Groening at the early stage of this?
Matt Groening was very involved in the early stages. Then we showed him every other build, I think. Every couple of months he would see the game and give his feedback off the cuff. Gracie saw it every month. And then Matt Groening is mostly involved. There's 2 sequels that were supposed to come out of this game. Matt Groening was mostly involved with the early stages of those, but he saw almost everything. He approved the writers, he approved the script, he approved the art direction, he approved, making these characters 3D, which Lisa's head looks like a mace when she turns around, is not the easiest thing to get Gracie and Matt across because the characters look one way and act one way. The funny story is I remember the first prototype, we told Matt Groening that Homer could kick Marge, but they won't do that in the game. They can't kick the kids. And the first thing he did is he kicked her all the way down the street, which was kind of funny because it's just very interesting to see these characters in 3D space, right, that are playable and you can move them around. And I think for Matt and Gracie, the big win was the push for the interiors.
Yeah.
I think once we went, we can go into certain landmarks, and within those landmarks, we're going to reference episode. But remember, this is the height of the show. The show was like at its height at this point. I think we referenced almost every episode up until that date in there. But yeah, the interiors, I think, what really got people excited because you could explore the Quickie Mart, you could explore the nuclear plant, you can go into Homer's house, at least to the living room, not downstairs. And I think people started to feel really immersive. To everybody's point, I think it was a GTA. People don't realize we just hid tracks with buildings, but like people really thought it was open world sandbox Simpsons in a very GTA style. So it really resonated.
Yeah. Greg, what was your first memory of working on the Simpsons projects here?
It was writing the driving prototype. Vlad was putting the team together, and we had a guy making a physics library internally because at the time, middleware physics was not even widely available. So he was building the physics library, and then I went to the producer putting the team together, and I said, hey, I have an idea of how to use this guy's physics library to create some fun driving. I remember actually reading articles in Game Developer magazine, like the print magazine, by Chris Hecker, and I got to see Chris Hecker at GDC some years later, and he was discussing, ways of approaching vehicle physics and stuff, and I'm like, this is really cool. So I took his kind of some of the concepts he was putting forth there, and I took the middleware physics, and we had a very short timeline. I think I worked 21 days straight, like super long days, but it was like, I was single and it was exciting and whatever. Hey, this is gonna be great. And I remember I had to create the some art to test with. That's where the red brick car came from. That's still a cheat in the game. You hold down both triggers and BBYX on an Xbox controller. That'll make the red brick car spawn in wherever the special cars are in each level. And I created that car because I wanted something, it was simple to create, and I needed the physics collision representation to the rendered object to exactly match the physics collision representation. So the first driving, like road rage driving, is pretty rough, man. I don't ever fire that up, but hit and run, I still enjoy. Like I'll fire that up sometimes.
There's a
drive
big difference in how those cars go.
So one of the big changes between those two, John, was the
Weeble.
I put a lot more. I think Road Rage had the Weeble. I'm curious anybody watching this video will know what the hell a Weeble is. But in Hit and Run, I put a lot more attention to the idea that a tire, especially like picture a rear wheel drive sports car, and you're accelerating, you're not going to have as much lateral resistance while you're using those wheels to drive forward. So if you do a turn, you're going to the back end of the car is going to spin out. And it'll be vice versa for front wheel drive. And when I incorporated that effect, I remember discussing with Travis actually, and then when I added that, and then you drive around and your back end would start to slide out, that was like a whole new world open up there. So, but yeah, doing the driving engine, the prototype that we sent off to Fox to prove that we could do driving, that was my first memory of working.
It had Highway to Hell on it, if I remember the music.
I remember Travis throwing that in for me, and I was very appreciative.
Definitely some weird faces when that came up in the Fox boardroom.
Wasn't there some guy that liked Eddie Money as well, and they put some Eddie Money in?
Michael Pohl, who was our boss, he was a giant and still is a giant Eddie Money fan, so we catered to the audience of trying to get this in green light by putting his favorite artist. Not the first time I've done that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Steve, what's your first memory of this project, of Hit and Run specifically?
Yeah, I joined it. It was already midstream. I think most of the design was already well in place. And really at that point, it was getting things polished and getting the QA effort together, having these guys wrangled and well fed and everything else, all of their other demands, very demanding group. It's like
Red Bull was a big
work
demand,
kids.
if I remember. We had to ship up Red Bull by the case, illegally, I might add.
Exactly. So yeah, in the producerly role, really it amounts to asking questions, answering questions, and doing a lot of typing. That's kind of how I would describe the job here. And then we started to transition over onto the sequel, which, as John said, a lot of work was done on that. That was pretty exciting at the time. But no, I think the polish at the end is what we were really grateful for, the time that we had to do that, because so many times, like really every game designer, every team that produces a game, I think they would always feel like they never finished it. They just abandoned it. At some point, it has to go out, especially in those days where it's going out on a disc. It's not like today, right? Where you can phase it out, you can get all kinds of feedback. It's like, no, guys, we're locking this down. Once this goes out the door, we never get to touch it again. And we had a finite amount of time to polish it. And, I saw the game come together and it looked like most other games up to a certain point. And then we had this, like, the magic happened right at the very end where it really, really did get the attention and effort that it deserved to. And I think that's why it really broke it through, that it was probably like the first open world, like casual open world game where people felt that the IP really captured the spirit of the universe. Like, it fulfilled the fantasy. So many other games, it's easy to fulfill the fantasy. NHL, Star Wars is like, well, I have to be able to blow up the Death Star. That one's easy. In NHL, I have to be able to score the goal that wins the Stanley Cup. When you do an open world game, it's like, you have to feel like you're in the universe. That's a big ask. That is a big, tall ask. And I think this was one of the first games that had the vision, had the design, had the team, had the enthusiasm, but also had the polish at the end to really, really deliver that vision.
And where that came. So Steve Birch is responsible for that. He was our boss at Fox. And if you remember, we sold to Vivendi during production. And
Right.
then he came to me and said, listen, I'm going to ask you a question. We're not going to ask you once, how much time do you really need on the game? And we talked to Vlad, we talked to Ian, and we really thought about that answer, and he padded the actual date in the contract so Activision assumed the date was further out in the contract, but he was responsible for that. Because if you remember, we were on a collision course for timing early in production of that game.
Collision course just meaning
they wanted it out by a certain date. Fox needed it out by a certain date. They wanted it out, but so he was really the responsible one for helping us give them the time that they needed. And you're right, this game came together at the end, and I always laugh because I always ask everybody this question: does anybody know anybody that did the holiday codes? Because so much time was spent in the Christmas and Halloween levels of those games, and so many people said they are so incredible, and very so few people saw it.
Carrie, that was you?
Yeah, I was part of that. Same with the mini game, the little racing mini game. Ton of work went into that. Hardly anybody played it.
Yeah, I hear a lot about the Halloween level, I got to say, though. Like that one, I get a lot of people chatting about how much they liked it, which is funny because thematically, it's an amazing level, like really captures sort of that part of the show as an actual level. Like, it's probably the weakest of the levels.
Somebody remind me how to access those? I forgot they existed.
Yeah,
you go to the BIOS clock and put in the holiday.
Because it has to be the actual holiday.
That day, and it does.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Jeez.
Cool.
Chris and Darren, we talked about it's GTA. I mean, were you all involved for those early big design ideas and big pitches for the framework for what this thing's going to be?
Yeah, I think by the time Darren and I came on, a lot of it was like the overall course was more or less set at that point. But when we joined, like, you can't imagine you'd open up a design doc and it'd just be full of just empty spots, like level 2 design goes here and this person says something we don't know. So we're just kind of filling this stuff out as it goes. Like, I'm looking through my notes here and I got this one thing I found here, arena boss encounters. There are 3 arena boss encounters in the game: the Stadium Truckosaurus, the Museum T-Rex, and the Duff Truckosaurus. Like, that's how unfocused it was. Like, that was basically the extent of the design at that point. Talking about 3 boss fights that didn't exist.
Yeah, I would echo that. Like, when we came on, the overall path was kind of set. The intention, I'll say, was going down that direction, but there was no content. So we basically had to fill in a bunch of blanks and then kind of help navigate along the way how to, maximize the fun or the potential in each of the activities that the player would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, it was locked in that you were going to be getting out of the car.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When we joined, they were going to get out of the car, but that wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
It was always the case.
Shimmers.
I know.
I think getting out of the car, if I recall, was very late in production, right? It was a racing game. It was Road Rage 2, essentially. There was a bunch of new stuff in it. But getting out of the car was basically like, okay, now we're getting out of the car. And all the programmers were like, the world is not designed for this.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't have a reason to get out of the car.
Yeah, there was a series of, if I remember, tests of Homer getting out of the car and what that animation looked like. But like, I remember sheer panic on Radical's face whether we were going to say yes or no, depending, because they thought yes would be a better game, but no would be, oh my gosh, we don't have all this work to do, because there's so many unknowns to that. There's so many edge cases of, when we added the bees in the storyline, I think that helped out that a lot, because that gave us something to do.
100%. Collector cards were a big ad too.
Yeah,
a lot easier than the bees, that's for sure.
And to your point, John, getting that extension was key in letting us finish off and execute, the bees, the cards, like all those, like all the off-foot gameplay. People would probably be shocked to understand how late in production all that came. So that's why, Steve talks about like the special sauce at the end that kind of helps line things up. It was a pretty worrisome road getting there, but I think we managed to do something, because here we are, 20 years later talking about something that keeps coming up in all of our lives.
Yeah. How big was the team?
Oh, 60 people?
That sounds right.
Okay.
65.
Big for the day.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like how that would compare to like what Vice City's development, probably be the closest like corollary for back then. But yeah.
Wasn't there some debate pretty late in the game too about whether the character should be able to jump?
Correct. And then how high they could jump.
Exactly, yeah, because there were all these like dependencies, well, really problems that it would have created, like whether they could get over this bush or not. Like it was, and that was a really, really late discussion, which would have been, well. We
had two big late discussions. That was one, and then the load to go into the interiors was a big discussion, because like everybody who doesn't know the tech at the time was like, can I just walk in? No. And so a lot of people were like, well, then I don't want to do it. It's like, just like, give me 5 seconds to load the interior. But yeah, that was a big debate as well with some high-level creative people on our side.
They were constrained by the world a lot too. Like if a fence is this tall in the show, it has to be this tall in the game. So we're a lot of times just trying to find clever excuses to like constrain the player to the actual playable space. Yeah.
There was no map to Springfield. Technically, a map of Springfield. There was not one, because in the show, they can move buildings around in the background for their own narrative purposes. But building it in 3D space with tracks to race around, it was a monumental task. Both sides had, when I say both sides, Gracie and Matt were involved, and then Radical's designers and producers were involved. I was more of a pass through that, because we just had to get it right. But that was, if I remember, that was a big debate. But I also remember E3 that year, there was a game that was cell shaded, and some of the Fox executives came back and said, wouldn't it be great if this game was cell? I think we were alpha too.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wouldn't this be great if this was cell shaded? I just remember, I've never, like, when Roy Schreider saw the shark for the first time, they did that crush focus through that weird like angle. That was my face when I heard those words, because like I could not call. I had the discussion, but those are the dangerous things when people go to shows like E3 that are executives.
Yeah,
come back with ideas.
Yeah, was that like
all the reviews came out later and said, "Oh, we like the game, but the cell shading's bad." And we're all like, "There is no cell shading in the game. What are you talking about?"
I'm trying to think, was it like Cell Damage? Was that the game that was referenced? Probably.
Yeah,
I think so. Cell Damage was done by the same group that did Road Rage at EA, because EA had distributed that game for Fox.
Oh, okay.
And that same team had done Cell Damage, so it came up a lot because Matt McKnight, who was a producer of that game, who was a producer of both games. So whatever game was more popular that month internally at EA was we should be more like that game, and then
sure.
Then we destroyed it in sales, and that was the end of that.
Nice. What does anybody have a sense of total sales for this game?
Yeah.
I've heard a bunch of numbers. I don't know how verifiable any of the numbers are, though, so I don't even want to say them out loud.
At different price points, but I think we're in the 8 to 10 range million units sold. About 85% of that I think was full price.
Okay. Nice. I'm glad you remember that, John. That's impressive. It's the year 2023. You realize you still have those numbers in your head. That's very impressive.
Oh, Vivendi, they burned those numbers in your head, because like I said there was 2 sequels, right? So one was with Radical, one was with another developer, but like the sales triggered that, right? If this was successful, because Simpsons is a valuable license, but it's not cheap, right? You have you had to pay for the music, you had to pay for the theme, which is Danny Elfman, right? And then you have to, like, the actors are they very rarely record lines like this. Like they recorded 2 or 3 seasons worth of lines in one session, right? Because if you think about a show, maybe a character has 5 lines, 6 lines if you're not Homer.
Yeah.
But we had to record 300, 400, or 500 lines, right? And then direct them through that. And some of them they're screaming, which is very taxing on them, right? So this was a heavy lift for sure, but it paid off.
Yeah, that was a big deal in the script too. All the people say like, no, Krusty can't say this because Dan's already tired. You're like, oh, okay, it's not Krusty anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we had to change some in the voiceover. We had to call people in the voiceover session saying this line, they're not going to do it. I mean, he was just tired. And his voice was so tired at the end of the day. He would do Krusty last. Or he wouldn't be able to get through any of the other characters. Right.
That's a little bombastic. Yeah. You mentioned that another developer was working on the sequel after Radical. What was going on there?
So Simpsons had 2 things. So Simpsons Hit and Run would have been done by Radical.
Okay.
There was a medieval Simpsons game that Matt Groening pitched that was being done at Stormfront after Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, so those are the 2 kind of things moving forward. But none of that would have happened without the success of Hit and Run, right? Because like, it's just like, I don't know, like we talked about this. Ed Zobrist was in charge of marketing at Vivendi, or the person I talked to most at marketing, and he just come to me. He said, you got to temper your excitement here about this game's sales, because everybody's point, Steve's point, this game came together way late. Everybody who played it, including first party testers, were like, this is super fun. Like, how long have you been working on this? And it really came together at the end. So as the sales numbers came in, they just kept escalating and escalating and escalating. And like more and more fans just kept, and this is before anybody could comment it or stream it. It was just a really interesting grassroots connection to the fans.
Yeah.
That became mass market. It blew past the fans into mass market. And it's just like everybody says, a lot of parents today grew up playing it, so they want their kids to play it. But it's of all the games I've made, like it has a very unique cultural fit. It's just very strange how popular this game became. Without, I remember when Obama got elected, he did that change.org where you put up anything, if 100,000 people agree, somebody put up their re-release Hit and Run or just sequel Hit and Run, and it got like 240,000 signature. I was one, but like there was like a couple, like it's just like, but that many people went and did it. It's like that was like 10 years after the game came out. It was just incredible.
Yeah, it's in Reddit like almost every week. People saying, and at this point, it's just like bots farming karma, where they're just like, "Hey, who thinks this game should get a remake?"
Yeah.
And you guys are always there searching for it.
One of the really smart things we did around the polishing phase was with the testing at the end when we were bringing users in to look at different levels. That the way it had been, I think, typically done up until then, which wasn't probably the best way to do it, was that people would be brought in as levels were completed and tested out that way. It's all, level 7's done. Let's bring some people in to look at it. What we did instead, which I thought was really smart, we actually set up the great room at Radical, which is like this big open space, and we set it up to have basically like a series of almost like little living rooms with like couches and places that set up so it actually felt like you were sitting at home. And we brought pizza in like we normally would, but we got people to commit for long periods of time. Like we didn't just bring people in to just do one level. We brought them in because what I was realizing then was you can't bring in somebody to play level 10 if they haven't done 1 through 9. You're not getting a fair shake at it then. So we were literally finding people that were signing up for a weekend, like to come do 3 days in a row to play for hours a day, so that by the time they got to level 10, which was what we wanted them to test, they'd experienced the whole first 9 levels. Otherwise, you're just getting bad data.
Yeah.
And I think that feedback was at the time quite a novel way of gathering the data, but it was hard to find people that were willing to commit to, sometimes 2, 3, 4 days to come test a game for us.
Yeesh. Carrie, it's a lot of rosy memories here and talking about how nostalgic everybody is for the game. When you think back on that overall game's development, how do you feel about it?
Oh, it's a mixed bag, right? We were young and stupid. Right, we did things to ourselves that I recommend to kids getting into the industry to never ever do. Don't work that hard.
It was miserable.
We punished ourselves out of love for the product and really get this thing out. And so it's good. I don't think I would change what I did. Many, many long hours. Yeah. But I don't recommend it to anybody else these days. It's bad for your body.
Do you think it was just a younger team wanted to be there, or was it a matter of everybody up top being like, look, we need to get this done. I'm sorry, everybody. We just got to stay here.
I think there was a lot of genuine passion about the project.
Yeah.
I've been on I've shipped a lot of games. I've been on a number of teams, and I've never, I think, felt the same sort of level of everybody loves this game working on it and really wants it to succeed. And we just poured everything into it.
Sure. There definitely became a point where we just knew we had to feed Radical content because they had such a momentum going. But yeah, this game was very difficult to make. I had a lot of ups and downs. Like I always tell people, making this game was like the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. Like it was like, I'll see you on the beach.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with corporate politics, TV show politics, TV show writers, game writers, the creator of the show, the other creator of the show, and the team. Like with the team's requirements out to make a great game needs to adhere to what the creators of the show want, and is never always fit. But at the end of the day, I look back at it very fondly. I'm sure everybody had the same nightmares. I'm sure you all got the calls from me and emails from me saying we had to make changes at the 11th hour because I hated sending those, but there were a lot of them. You can't do this. You can't do this. This is unapproved. And it definitely caused a course correct. But I think the momentum the team had and the passion the team had helped absorb that, so that I'm sure they don't hate me as much as they probably should. But like, there was quite a few things I can't remember specifically offhand, but that we had to change during the course of production just because Fox wouldn't allow it. Fox Television or Gracie or Matt, because it just went too far, or they didn't feel it was on brand.
Yeah. I remember a funny one. It was just silly. At one point, I was working on the driving cameras, and we had put together a little demo, which we called the Matrix Cam, which was like Homer would drive, he'd hit a jump. And this was like when the Matrix had come out, right? The camera paused, and it did like this total spin around. And it was like, and the programmers and everybody was like, yeah, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Woo! Lots of high fives. And we sent it at Fox, and you guys were like, we don't get it. We don't like it. Take it out.
What?
And it was like,
I do remember that one, but I think it was used. That shot was used in the commercial, like when it went through the.
We use it there again later. Yeah.
I remember rejecting that. Yeah.
What the hell's wrong with Fox? Why would you turn down a cool?
There was a debate, an art debate amongst like showing the car in 3D. Like you can see all the art of the car and how it would look, and so there was some question about that, and just questions about performance and stopping. Because you have lots of opinions as movie studios, not all great, but a lot of people thought like, oh, the player's going as fast as they can, and then they have to stop for this carousel, then continue. So there's this break in game and inertia gameplay. So there's just some concerns about that. But I do remember that one. Now that you say that, there's a couple other ones like that, and like, yeah, it was crazy. I'm
trying to think of like that design challenge of taking GTA, fusing it with Simpsons, making it acceptable for a younger age range. I mean, that has to be a tough thing because it's like, well, Simpsons, it's kind of an edgy brand, but like carjacking, probably not. They should probably just like sit next to the driver. Can you talk about, does anybody remember some of those challenges of like, taking the GTA formula and then realizing like, okay, inherent in that GTA formula is a lot of mayhem that we need to dial down on?
Biggest challenge design-wise was probably just getting the tracks right.
Yeah.
Because we're sort of designing it around, a good turn, like Greg's, kind of 90-degree power slide turn, which is about the best thing you could do in the game. Yeah. So you're trying to make a track which is like a collection of power slides without making it look like that's what you're doing. That was probably Sheik did the bulk of that work, I'd say. Just laying out the tracks first of all, and then also having the remake tracks, because then like stuff in the driving engine would change. Now something here's got to change, and then we learned this incredibly useful thing on level 3, so now we got to redo level 1 again. Like just tons and tons and tons of iteration on that stuff.
The biggest thing for the Gracie was it wasn't dirty enough. Like Springfield, like they wanted like newspapers all over the streets and cracks in the windows, like because it was really pristine. And they're like, there's like that. I would say from our side, the biggest debate about the GTA thing, other than the violence of kicking mergers down the street, you couldn't kick the kids though, but like was character inclusion. So Cletus was the biggest debate we ever had, like because Cletus has his whole series of missions and they're all really funny. Including indoor plumbing, I remember using Christmas wrap tubes for his indoor plumbing.
Yeah. And I've managed to turn Cletus into a Muslim. I'm so proud of that.
Wait, how does this?
It was at the end of his mission where he says, "That's what my papi said, but now he's with Allah." And and then we shipped with that, and the voice actor said it, and I was just like, I'm so pleased about this shipping. Yep.
There's no way. Did that go back into The Simpsons at all, or is that just a weird anomaly for Cletus lore?
Yeah, it's in the weird like non-canon bucket. But as far as I'm concerned, like I wrote it, the voice actor said it.
All right, there we go.
Voice actors did not say everything that was on the page, so get them. That's a big win.
Yeah, there's a funny one. Harry Shearer wouldn't say Semper Fi for Seymour because, of course, Seymour wasn't a Marine.
Right.
But like that went all the way into the booth. At which point Harry's just like, "No, I'm not saying it."
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, he's the hardest one to direct. He's super talented and he gets through everything. But like he has lots of like he wants to make sure it fits the character. He goes to the character what they're saying more than most. And he has things to say about that. He would not say that line. He was a few lines he would not say because either went against the character or wasn't accurate to. for what that character went through.
Is that helpful, or how often are you just pulling your hair out like, come on, actor, we're at the finish line, just do it?
They're so good at what they do.
Yeah.
They move so quickly through it. It's always very helpful. It can be really frustrating at times because sometimes they dig in and they're like, I'm just not saying that. And then it's like, well, this is a mission launch into like 7 different little things that we have to do. And then they just wouldn't do it for any number of reasons, right? They're probably right in all those reasons because we're just renting the universe that they created, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, they're all, excessively talented in the booth. It was incredible to watch them perform. Yeah,
Greg, you had some favorite lines?
The more breakfast churro for Lenny. I love it. I don't know why.
Yeah. Lenny's he's funny, and you almost can't even tell why he's funny. And he's less funny when somebody's trying to make him funny. That's one of those. Yeah.
There's a funny line about the aliens that Homer says. We can't really say it here, but I don't know how it got in. But he's trying to explain to Marge what the aliens were.
Yeah. Well, I've got the finished script open on my screen right here. I'm checking it out now. Yeah, there's awesome stuff in here, and it's funny. It's even got the master list of like what lines are recorded and not recorded throughout it. Yeah.
What
I have all the voice files.
Outtakes and stuff.
Outtakes we cut out.
Okay.
Yeah. They tend to they have opinions, so we tend not to share the opinions of Radical.
Yeah. What about choosing the playable characters? Were there more playable characters that would be surprising? Outside of like Apu's kind of the weirdest addition of like, I didn't expect that. Out of what, 5?
Yeah, those are mostly Gracie decisions, right? They know the core audience of the popularity. We did go back and forth on a bunch of like combo character. Like it's just like which ones had the most lines, which one could deliver the funny, which ones like Radical would tell us like, here's what we need out of the game. This is early on, but then they would make the final decision on the characters because they know they have the data, which is popular, which wasn't. But that was kind of a little bit led by them.
Yeah, but we never suffered for it because anytime we wanted to add somebody, he was just in a mission. And then we got out whatever funny we were trying to squeeze out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like one thing I want to make everybody understand is just how funny the team really was. Like by some weird coincidence, it's like all the funny people at Radical round up in a room together. So we were just like writing stuff down all the time. I remember Kevin Fink said a great joke at a party once. And I ran downstairs to write it down because I was just like, that's really funny. That's going in the script. Yeah.
And the Simpsons writers are very smart. Matt Selman and his team, like they're very good on this, but they also respected what was trying to be done here. So they to your point, they would let lines go that they knew were funny because a lot of times they didn't have not bored here syndrome, but they were definitely really good at guardrails.
Yeah, exactly.
They wrote about,
it came back and whatever changed was better.
They wrote about 20 lines. I will say this, that were so offensive or inappropriate that are like they didn't get past Fox. They're like delete that line before because they were just trying to push the limit here or there.
Yeah.
It was some of the lines you're just like, I can't believe they just wrote that. And they're like, yeah, just put it in the game. It's okay. It's like, no, I can't put it in the game.
Chris, you got any memories of these? Volley them out there if you remember it, man.
Well, I've got tons of stuff here. I'm trying to decide like what was even tricky for me. Like in the sense of like trying to get the voices right. And it was so easy because the hardest work in comedy is just making up like a good character and a good voice. That would have already been done for years and years and years afterwards. Like we could have given them the phone book. It would have been funny out the other side, right?
Yeah.
For younger people, phone book is how you used to find names to call people. But
that's such a tough thing to try and map out. Like when you're trying to find even a good development team for a license, like how do you gauge the comedy chops of a studio? I'm trying to think of like what Radical had released up until that point. If there's obvious things of like these guys, they're going to slay comedically, but you need to have a good, funny group to make this happen, right?
I don't think it's a studio. There were plenty of unfunny people at Radical too.
I can name about 6.
Yeah,
I think we just have that relationship on the right price point
that you're blessed with at the moment. That's when the magic happens.
Yeah. Sorry, Carrie, what were you saying?
I think we had the right relationship with Fox because they had just canned all of our sports games. Basically about to be unemployed. So they were able to get a really good price point out of Ian. Hey, we're going to do this. It's going to be cheap, and you guys are going to do it. So we just said yes.
It kind of mirrors The Simpsons. I feel like early on there were so many Fox jokes.
But to be fair, the engine did become the engine for Scarface, and then
it's true.
And then Prototype 1 and 2. Yep. So
weird.
We were basically the discount bin of game development.
How would you all describe Radical in this era? What was unique about the team in this time?
I think young was a good word to throw in there. Mary said earlier.
And that is to me, I always describe it to these youngsters. It was the golden era, I'd say, not only of game development, but especially at Radical at that time. That team, the chemistry, the combination, I think everybody's kind of touched on it. We were all young. Most of us were single, no kids, all of our hair, and it was dark. We were eager, just excited to be in the industry. It was a different time. Like back then, we were working like insane hours, but accepting it. And like it just wasn't a thing because that's what you did when you got into the industry. And then years later, you realize, oh, that's bad and we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And like to Carrie's point, you would recommend never doing that. Looking back, it's one of those things where you go through a battle, although it was a comedic battle, of course, but you go through a battle with these people and you feel closer for it because we had a lot of good close-knit relationships coming out of it. But I'd say so much of the team was funny and we embodied so much of that humor on a day-to-day basis. The game inevitably was going to get infected with some of that, whether it was the small touches here and there or whatever it was, the broad strokes. And I mean, obviously you have a winning IP already, so the biggest thing is just don't screw it up.
Yeah, I would say from Fox's point of view, it could have been very easy when we, as Gary put it so eloquently, when we killed their sports games, and I think there's like 4 of them, to be desperate, but they weren't desperate. We saw them as hungry, which benefited, right? Because we saw the drive but yeah, I've never had a relationship with the development team like the one I had with the team making those 2 games. It's about as close-knit, open-door transparency, both sides, all us against the world mentality that I've ever been involved with. It was very fun. Like it was a very difficult political on our side and then work hours on their side. But at the end of the day, everybody looks back with massive fondness for those teams.
Steve, obviously this is a sliver of everybody that worked on the game. Are there big unsung heroes that you want to give a shout out to that stand out to you on the project?
Oh geez. I mean, yeah, that's a massive list. It really is. Like there isn't anybody when you're in a situation like this where everybody is pulling the big hours and doing the long shifts and just rallying around one vision. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't want to even start the list because then I'd be ashamed afterwards of who I left off. It really was everybody.
Well, the good news is Greg wants to start the list. You had a name in mind, Greg?
Better him than me.
I have some distinct memories of Travis doing stuff that was really cool. And one of them was seeing Homer walking around on his machine for the first time. So, but he may have also left mid-project for other companies. Maybe that's why people's memories aren't all fond, but he was a good guy. He did awesome shit.
Who had the toughest role on this project? Was it the tech team, you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the programmers had it toughest because we had to support everybody, right? The artist is like, hey, we'd like to try this new shader. And at the time, right, the PS2 was new. Radical was like pushing the limits of technology. And everybody wanted to do everything that was cool all the time. And so we just tried really hard to say yes to everything.
And you had the GameCube version.
And we had the GameCube was awesome.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I
love it. The best version of the game is the GameCube by far.
Hey, thanks. I did most of the work.
I take that back.
But all the biggest bugs. So that my dirtiest, darkest secret about the GameCube is its bugs. And so the worst thing you can do is when you play it, you go to any of the things that did a little animation. So go inside Moe's Tavern and go to like one of the things, and the animation the machine just goes and then goes crazy because the GameCube had so little memory that we had to like super compress all these animations to the point where they just broke, but nobody noticed, and we shipped it.
Yeah,
wow. But I see it.
I wanted to ask you guys I don't know if you were part of this. So we the last build, PS2. This is my nightmare. This is post-traumatic stress. At the motel, way out in the skirts, when driving as Lisa, there's a guardrail, and we found out. One of our testers found out if you lean against the guardrail, she fell through the world. So we had. This is like an hour before we're supposed to submit. We had 17 people in my office trying to determine the data of will somebody at Sony find this bug and kick it back. It's an A bug falling through the world, right? So like, and I think we talked to Vlad at length about it. I think Vlad was part of all those conversations. And then we determined no way a tester is going to go across the guardrail by the motel out on the last, like I think it was the far right side of the map. It was the first bug they found. I told you so was in my office from my bosses could have been deafening.
What is it? Is the GameCube the easiest to develop for back in the day? I mean, Carrie, what's it like? That was the hardest because of memory limitations. Can you rank the systems?
Memory, craziest stuff. We had to. The animations were loaded into audio memory and streamed out. Like we were pushing the limits of that little guy. as much as we could. And it was also very late in the game because it came out. It released like way late in production. And we had a really awesome, I forget what they were called, if they were called Copperhead at that time, but the Radical Tech group, which was like a team of like 30 hardcore engineers, very quickly ported our engine over to the GameCube. And it was like an amazing piece of work. Jeez. And then we were able to get it to go, but I had to write like assembler in GameCube. I had to do all kinds of crazy stuff just to get it to work. And there's another thing about this team that we should talk about too. Do you remember, John, that the PSP port we did of Hit and Run? We did it to the PSP, which had also just come out. No. Well, we called it the 8 meg miracle when the PSP came out. Also, just after, I think it was just after the GameCube. Fox and everybody really wanted it on the PSP, and so we worked super duper hard. And before we even got the hardware of the Sony portable, we were told it had 8 megs of RAM. So the PS2 at the time, I think, had 32 megs. The GameCube had 24, and we were told that this PSP had 8. And so we managed to cram Hit and Run into 8 megs of memory. And we called it the 8 meg miracle. And we did this big presentation where we had it running on all these different platforms in an office. We had PSP, GameCube, all running the same game at the same time. And we had a whole bunch of people come through, and it was like this big fest, and it was awesome. I don't think they ever shipped it though, but
no, didn't ship it.
Yeah, and one less stick too, right? Like a game designer, the camera with the other stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened? Why didn't it see the light of day?
ROI.
Okay.
Yeah.
It had any other stupid discs like.
And Simpsons carries a large back end participation.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why there's not constant Simpsons games out there. Is it's a tricky license to navigate here.
There's not a Simpsons game. How can I say this? There's not a lot of Simpsons games out there because Simpsons have a high quality bar, both Gracie and Matt, and they want distinctive games. So if you were to come to them and say, I want to make Hit and Run 2 made sense because we're on a roll. But if you were to say, I want to make a driving game now, they say, no, I want something. They really wanted something original that felt Simpsons. And I think they tried with the EA game. I don't think it hit on any cylinders, but like, because it just became too self-reflective. But like, they really wanted GTA. This gave them GTA. Radical gave them GTA. But they really wanted something different that was unique to The Simpsons. And the cost of entry of the actors, because to be fair, like we did this game, this fell under the actors' original agreements. Because it was before their contract expired, they were trying to renegotiate. They've since renegotiated, so their fees would be exorbitantly more money than it was when Fox was paying for the game when it started before Vivendi took over. So their original voiceover deals, I think, were still active. So this fell underneath whatever cost that was per session. This would be that cost. This is before they renegotiated and kind of held out to the larger number because of how popular the show got. So we got lucky of kind of just coming in under the radar before that happened.
Jeez.
Because there's a lot. I mean, everybody here knows it. There's a lot of recorded lines for this game.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you're looking at the script right now. It's got to be big, right?
I forget what the total thing was, but I mean, if you told me it was 10 or 11,000, I wouldn't even be surprised. Like it was just endless and stuff that went in there. Yeah,
I think I have that for local because I have the localization sheets.
Yeah,
it's 12,231.
Yeah. There we go.
Eesh. Greg, do you remember? I don't know, most memorable day of development? Something stand out for you?
Most memorable day of development.
Biggest I don't know, moment, we did it, or biggest disaster, anything stands out that way?
I don't know. Mine would probably still go back to the original driving prototype. To get Radical on board, or get the publishers on board with the fact that we could do driving games. Because it was done the day before we had to send it off, and I came to the office and everybody in both rooms was playing my prototypes. That was pretty cool.
That's
very
cool.
Cool.
Yeah, mission accomplished.
I have a weird distinct. This is not greatest day of the project, but I remember talking to Chris early on, and Chris, you were like just amazed at how. I think in your own words, you said like, I never thought my encyclopedic knowledge of The Simpsons would ever like earn me a living. And
it proved so useful because the weird thing was, so when I was going to university, my mom would mail me tapes of The Simpsons, and Terry and I actually lived together at the time, and broke students that we just like watch videotapes The Simpsons over and over and over again. Yep. So then I joined a game team and they're like, hey, what does the legitimate businessman's social club look like? And I'm like, let me show you exactly what it looks like, and it wound up being incredibly useful. And
you never get sick of it. I never got sick of The Simpsons.
I was so in love with the show, and lots of people on the team were. And then the other thing we were in love with at the time was actually Family Guy, which had just been canceled for the first of like 7 times or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So we'd work on the game all day, and then dinner would come in, and we'd like watch Family Guy while eating dinner, as a group, like over and over and over again, and just loved it. Yeah, it was funny. I loved it. Really did. And it never once occurred to me that it was going to be a bad game. As weird as that might seem. And lots of people had bad days and, whatever. But like, I was so just sort of like young and silly that it never occurred to me it might be a bad game, and just sort of worked on it. And
I don't think we ever had a trip up during development that would put that thought in your mind. I think it was just about getting it done and getting it all put together. Yeah. I don't think we had a catastrophe.
The single lawsuits kind of put some twists on the production at the time, though. We had to change the arrow.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Do an arrow in the ground.
The patent from Sega. Yeah.
Wait, what is this? Oh, it's like that was a road rage thing?
Yeah, it was As a Crow Flies versus Flying.
Yeah.
Patent for. There was a tester, and when we showed Road Rage at E3, there was a tester that pushed me and wanted to punch me because he says I was copying their game too much, and he was a tester at Sega, and I was like, it's insane. So, but you can't copyright a mechanic, you can't copyright an idea, but they had a unique way of doing the arrow in Crazy Taxi that Road Rage didn't. I don't think we technically actually copied it. I think technically it was different, but at the end of the day, it would have cost too much to go through. But that was what Sega tried to bite us on.
Yeah, boy. Did you guys ever hear any feedback from Rockstar?
No.
Okay.
No, actually.
No.
Come on, Rockstar, reach out to these folks, please. Yeah.
It's kind of insulting, actually.
Now that I think about it, what the
let's see, John, I mean, final thoughts from Matt Groening and the Gracie team once they saw the finished game?
I would say to get to the point, what Radical worked extremely hard in this game, and like they said, creative passionately, so it was very easy just to be their guardrails, right, for a period of time. When you got out of the car, Homer said a line, interacted with the character, and went into a interior, showing that to Matt and Gracie Films, Denise Ercott and Matt Groening at the first time was like, it was great because the reaction was like, this is an immersive Simpsons game. You are in Springfield. You're not driving past inanimate objects. You can actually get out and interact with it. I think that was the best day, but I think, they loved it. They loved the idea all the way through, right? And then, so I think when they saw it come together at the end, they were very excited about it. I think Matt was very happy at the end. He said it was the best Simpsons video game they've ever done. To be fair, through Activision, Fox has done something called Simpsons Wrestling.
Yeah.
Which was not good. And then Code Monkeys, if you remember them, were doing a Simpsons skateboarding game, which also shipped just before Hit Run. So they didn't have the greatest expectations going into this game of like the previous one's execution, but they, all of them, writers, actors, Matt Groening, Denise Ercott, they loved it at the end. It was a great experience for them because it felt like it gave the fans exactly what they wanted, and it gave them what they wanted, which is explore Springfield.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Does anybody have a distinct memory that we haven't shared yet from the game's development?
I remember the first time somebody beat the last mission. That was awesome. We're all watching them play, and they beat it. This is cheer. Rah! We all lose our minds. It was great.
Just a tester? You're all just watching that?
No, that was Joe. It was one of the designers playing it. It was great. Okay. And it was such a hard mission. Look at Reddit. It's too hard. But
yeah, that was actually part of the challenge. We had to make the game very easy and accessible early on, so that a wide audience could, come into it. The kids could come in and play it, but the difficulty slowly ramps up, and by the end of the game, it's like an incredibly hard mission, and you're trying to tune it to the point of like, can it even be done? And then, it was late one night and we're all, jacked up on Red Bull. Thanks, John. And then finally, you watch it can be done, and a huge cheer goes up, like, like the first shipment was away, so.
The burning carcass of the cars burning, you can still drive them. And that was great. Whoever did that was great. I love that.
I'd like to call that out, actually, because there was a whole bunch of things that we did that was passionate, that because we were like hardcore gamers, and I think some of us were quite funny looking at the designers, that we added stuff in. And actually, it was really great that you, John, and the guys at Fox and everybody else would be like, yeah, that's something totally new and it's funny, leave it in. Like everything we added basically had to be vetted by like 1,000 externals.
Star Chamber.
We would just throw stuff in and then hope that you guys also liked it. And a lot of our favorite stuff got in, like the wreckage cars that you can still drive, and that. Yeah, that was really great. And I think that's different, I think, than modern development now, like AAA now. I think.
Do you know who the biggest character skin debate was amongst Fox? Was Moo Moo Homer.
Yes.
That we had a huge debate about that. It was my favorite character. Mr. Plow is my favorite car, but like that character was so iconic to the show at the time that they weren't sure they wanted to put it in the game, and you guys could pull it off.
Yeah.
Really? What, just the comedy of it, or just the look of it? Like, what's so sacred
all of
about
it, comedy, the way he
Homer?
runs, and so there's a lot of discussion about scale. So is he the Moo Moo might be wider than the door of the car or the building. Then we have discussions about Maggie. We had discussion how can you see Lisa and Bart drive because they're smaller, and so like
Right.
it was a lot of debates about that, which Radical was able to solve creatively.
Yeah. One of the few superfan jokes that was cut, and I never really knew why it was cut. We used to have star wipes, which are Homer's favorite
right.
wipe.
Yeah.
Because Homer would I remember an episode where somebody says like, Dad, there's other kind of wipes, and he says like, why would you eat garbage when you could have steak for dinner every night? So we put star wipes in, and somebody cut it. They're just like, why do we have star wipes? Let's cut these.
And you had to be like, well, actually, your character has.
Yeah, actually, to the super fans,
But that was another debate that both teams had with Great is how self-friendship is the game aware of itself being a game, and then so the decision was it was not. They were living their lives.
Yeah.
It just sounds like your job in particular, John, is a bunch of incredibly frustrating, stupid conversations.
It can be.
It can be. Okay.
It pays off in the voice sessions and dealing with when things are rolling, but
Sure.
like it is. Again, it's like the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. Everybody has an idea every day of like how they're going to kill this game, or how they want to change it, or it'd be great if is the worst thing you could hear in a movie studio, and you hear that in the hallways. And Greg Goodrich was my boss at the time, and he kind of helped me guide that. And so it was there's a lot of things that Radical didn't know that was going on behind the scenes, especially when Vivendi took over. They're like, yeah, now that we have it, we want to see it this. They wanted to take away that out of the car stuff and just make a straight sequel. So
really? Okay.
There's a lot of battles going on. There's a lot of budget battles obviously going on because Radical did it for dirt cheap at the start, but again, we wanted to fund it, given that extra time, right? So I had to go back to the drawing board to get more money for it, which was deserved. I mean, we would not have let Radical polish the game if they didn't earn that right, and they earned that right with all their hard work. So it was a fairly easy decision at the end, and it paid off. But yeah, it's just funny because I get so fond talking about it because it was a great memory because we were all young and I had 2 young kids, but like it's such a horrific experience. Because you're dealing with the politics, you're dealing with your associate producer getting stopped at the border with 15 cases of Red Bull, which actually happened, and then like. It's because Red Bull, if I remember, was illegal in Canada, right?
At the time, yeah.
That's right.
And that's the only request that Radical made of Fox. Give us Red Bull, and we'll work 24/7, which I think they did. But again, it's everybody's right. It's a testament to the team's sense of humor, their knowledge of Simpsons. They're to be really brave and push the envelope because we really did push the envelope, and then putting something in front of the writers and Matt Groening and Gracie and Fox that they're like, yeah, this hits the mark, and that's one thing that they did say. It hits the quality mark of something that they could be proud of, which wrestling and skateboarding did not do.
Yeah.
No offense to those development teams.
No offense. And then it changed. I mean, talk about the tech being used for Scarface later on. I mean, did it change Radical overall in a big way and kind of get you prepared for stuff like what Incredible Hulk? I'm trying to think of like what would come up after that.
Yep.
Oh my God, Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff we had developed, right? Because a lot of money at Radical went into developing this technology that we had that could be shared across multiple platforms. Because it was important for us to not just ship on Sony. I'd be on Xbox, also on these other ones. So they spent a lot of time on that, and that was able to then be applied into all these other games. And then we would have things like these different teams would be playing their, working on their games at different rates, and they'd be developing tools, and we'd try to steal their technology or share our stuff. And there's a lot of everything in all the games, right? It was really good to see how stuff that we created was then used in prototype in a different way, right? The loading technology we did everything with this grid-based thing, but then they took it and turned it into this really cool hexagon-based thing, which was like super neat. And then we had steal back camera technology.
The biggest crime was we didn't obtain Vivendi did not obtain the Simpsons license, though they had an offer in. Mm-hmm. So the Simpsons came back with an offer of 5 games for X amount of dollars, which I can't say. It's a really good deal, and Vivendi said no. After the success of Hit and Run.
And what was the logic there?
I don't know. They did games like Cold Winter and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't know, games
that weird time travel one.
Yeah, they did and to everybody's credit here, the sequel was like we had airships, we had planes, we had lots to go on the Simpsons. This was going to be a franchise, no doubt in everybody's mind, and then so EA was able to come in and get the license.
Yeah,
and then pay $80 million to talk about their own games at every level. But yeah, it was sad because I think we had a ton of momentum. There was no momentum lost between the shipping of this game and the work being done on the sequel.
Was the sequel playable?
We had a design doc, a PowerPoint. I think we had a gym. Like we had one thing. I think we had the blimp, the blimp moving around. But like, I don't think we had much more than that because it was like a no-brainer. Of course, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
All right, and Greg, you had set up that we were going to go with pulling like things behind the vehicle.
Yes, you're going to tow things, right? Yeah.
Oh,
Prototype, yeah, towing a wagon or a tractor,
which was awesome. Yeah.
Huh. Hey, Chris, do you remember the story pitch for the sequel?
Not in the slightest, quite frankly. It was all over the map because in those early days, kind of everybody just imagines what they want.
Sure.
So I'm sure there were like 12 competing storylines at that point, and everybody absolutely sure that was the one. So yeah, who knows what the final story would have been.
I remember the team just being shocked that we didn't continue on with the sequel because, to John's point, like it was a no-brainer. It was like, well, of course we're going to be doing this. The stars are aligned. We're treading down this path. And just like yeah, I guess we're not. So it was like just disbelief, pure disbelief.
It was a 5-game deal for like less money than I think that Vivendi paid for the first game. It was like really cheap because they're really happy. I remember getting that call. They're like, yeah, we decided to pass. I'm like, pass on which game? They're like, the Simpsons license. Like, and I remember Steve Burch, who sold us to Vivendi. He was our boss at Fox, and he stayed behind. But like, he was just like, I don't understand. I gave it to you in a silver platter. Why aren't you just saying yes and doing these games? Mm-hmm. It was just it was a really bizarre decision. I'll never understand it. Most people on the production level never understood it.
Yeah. Can you say what this budget was for Hit and Run?
No.
Really? Top secret. Taking it to your grave.
we got a really good deal from Radical.
Okay. Interesting.
But they were able to build their engine on it. They were super cheap.
Yeah, we were legendarily cheap.
Plus, I think the exchange rate back then was a little bit in our favor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But no, it's but we used them for like Scarface was a big, huge budget, right? And I think my impression of Scarface was I worked on it for the first half. Then I moved on to Ghostbusters, but like I felt like they thought like there were some learnings of like, oh, we're open world, but then when they got into actually open world, they're like, we got some work to do.
Open world is hard. I remember
because Simpsons was more sandbox than open world, probably, right?
We had to worry about in the Simpsons or our open world thing, and I when I'm remembering back when we were doing this, I don't actually think at the time we were thinking we were making a GTA game. We were making in our minds a Simpsons game that had all these things that we had to do, and what we needed to do with the world was make it so much fun per meter was like our metric that we were trying to say.
Gameplay per square feet.
Per square feet, exactly, right? Is you're driving and it's an empty zone. What can we put in this zone to be fun, right? Like, and that was where the majority of our time was spent. And it's interesting that Scarface, unfortunately, didn't really learn that that lesson, right? And I think that's a little bit different from a game like GTA, where it's really like the fun is here, and then it's the driving between. You don't care about stopping, but with The Simpsons, that road in between the 2 points had to be fun, like all the time.
Yeah, we're making racetracks that were pretending to be a city. So we have lots of like fake turns. So like you go left or right, and then you do the whole loop, and you came back where you started from. And the player says, "Oh, I guess because of my decisions, I'm back where I started from."
Yeah, and we had buildings in the way, right, to hide some of the track. Yeah, I remember that. I actually, I'm trying to think about it now. I think this might be the funniest game ever. I'm trying to think, like, obviously the South Park games are more like shock value, like they're really well done, but they try to shock you with their humor. I'm trying to think, for straight gameplay, married to story, married to dialogue, I don't think I could think. I'm trying to think of one where, because people say they laugh out loud at some of the gap between expectation and results. Some of the punchlines were just so funny. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a testament to everybody on this call, and then like everybody says, the 100 of other people in Vivendi, Fox, and Radical that worked tirelessly to bring this.
Yeah. Final thoughts, final stories from anybody? Anybody dying to say something about The Simpsons Hit and Run that you haven't said over the last 20 years?
Careful. I'm right here.
Yeah, speaking of the 20 years part, I look at these guys here and it just reminds me back of those days. And, back then it was just a group of wild, smelly, young, bright-eyed, exuberant, chaotic just playful, and I look at them now, and they're not young anymore.
Wow, thanks, Steve.
Wow.
Beat down, haggard, weather beaten.
It's all the other things I said.
Yeah.
They're just not young.
Yeah, Steve looked the same, but he was already
That's
old.
because all of us are like, this is the way games are made. This is going to be a great, fun career.
Yeah, that's right. We're actually still 20. It's
Well, hey, on behalf of everybody who's a fan of this game, thank you for your hard work back then. Thank you for all the late nights and frustrating conversations and technical nightmares to make that thing happen. You made millions of people smile a bit. So thank you for busting your asses on that one.
Thank you.
Hey.
For playing.
Yes, absolutely.
But do you buy it, or did you get to play it for free? Because if you didn't buy it, then I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah, we bought it. We all bought it.
Okay,
There's no doubt about it. Yeah, absolutely, everybody. Great. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate your time. And thank you so much, everybody watching or listening to this interview. If you enjoyed it, you can always subscribe to MinnMax's YouTube channel. Check out more interviews like it. Otherwise, we'll be back in the future. Thanks so much, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much. That was awesome.
You've seen the headlines. You know that the media landscape is consolidating. Having truly independent games media is more important than ever. MinnMax can exist independently as a place about games, friends, and getting better, but we need your help. The good news is that it's easy. Just click on that subscribe button or unlock a mountain of benefits by going to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Thanks so much, everybody.